Alright y'all, I'm doing a short little video here, probably about 4 to 5 minutes long. So I just want to show you where the meat came to that we made a short about earlier. Again, it did simmer for about 2 hours. So we got our shredded beef there. And then over on this side we have our shredded chicken. So after I drained off the excess liquid, I noticed that it still needed a little more seasoning. So what I did was I added a chicken style taco seasoning to some of the chicken, and then a beef one to the beef, just to give it a little more enhanced flavor. Also, from the last video I made of the beef birria, I really like this beef birria adobo sauce. Not just used for beef though, we can use it for almost any kind of meat. I did add a little touch to each one, so it's going to give it a little more flavor. But mainly what I'm trying to show you at this point is how we're going to break down our peppers for the stuffed peppers. So we're going to start with a green pepper here. I have green and red today, but basically what we're going to want to do is we want to cut out right along the wall and side of the pepper without cutting that too much. And we can just pop this center piece out. You might have to break it a little bit inside. That's going to get that out there. I also, another trick to the trade, take the seeds out, just kind of smack them on your hand, throw them in the trash. Also like to do a little trick here where I level it out on the base. That'll help it stand up really good. And I don't want to waste any of this either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break off the outside of this pepper here, and I'm going to trim it up, and we'll dice it up really fine, and we'll mix it in with our meat as well. But once we get the core taken out of that pepper, you see the little ribs in there. We're going to try to get the white ribs out of there as well. So just take your paring knife and kind of go along the wall again. Again, you don't want to pierce the wall. You want it kind of seared or sealed in there so that when it's baking, all that juiciness stays inside the pepper. Then just take your fingers and kind of break off those ribs. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like I always say, you just want it sufficient. You also want to be careful too when you're flattening out the base that you don't cut off too much to leave a nice wide open hole there. You're trying to avoid that as well. So we're going to prep up all of our peppers here, and then I'm going to show you how we stuff them. But this is kind of the general idea of what you're looking for. Again, I picked some more shallow peppers rather than tall. That way in our pan they kind of stay inside and bake them. So when I do bake them, which we'll get to at the end, I'll show you the process for that. But again, let's get the peppers all prepped up, and then I'll show you the meat mixes, and we'll go from there. So as I'm finishing up the red peppers here, I'm just going to kind of talk about why I'm doing what I'm doing. So the reason we want to take out the ribs inside the peppers is because that pith gives your food a little bit of bitterness, a little bit of tannin in that. I'm trying to avoid that, especially with these red bell peppers, because we want them as sweet as possible. I'm going to pair the red bell peppers with the beef today, and then the green bell pepper we're going to do with the chicken. The red will have a nice sweet consistency that'll pair well with the beef, and the green will have more of an earthy tone, so that'll give it more of an earthy flavor for the chicken. So again, we're cutting off the base there just to level it out, rolling along the wall of that pepper with your paring knife. Pop out the center. Again, we want to save the excess that's on the stem. But we're going to trim up the pith on that as well. Get all that white out of there. Because all that white's going to give us... come on, guys. There's my dog freaking out at some deer. Anyway, all that white is going to get trimmed off of those scraps as well. And then we're going to do just a real fine dice with them. And I'm going to mix them in with the meat itself. We'll trim all that up here. So the peppers are ready to go. But what we want to do next is, again, like I was saying, you got this white pithy part on the tops there. We're going to trim that up so that we're just getting the nice color, the green or red color that we want. Trim all that up. I want to try to get as much as you can off. Again, I'm all about not perfection, but at the same time doing it the right, most efficient way. And get all this off here. And I'm going to do that with the green as well. And once we get all that done, I'll show you how we just dice them up real quick, real fine dice. And we'll get them mixed in with the meat. And then we'll start stuffing them. Alright, we got the majority of the white stuff off of there. I'm going to set aside my paring knife. And as you've seen in one of my videos, sharp knife is your best friend. I'm just going to run my chef knife against my sharpener here real quick, just to give it a little hone. Especially with vegetables and fruit that have a really thick skin, you definitely want a sharp knife, because otherwise you won't be able to cut through those. But real easy here. We're just going to do a nice fine dice to it. I like to get cut into nice strips first, and then I'll come back at it the opposite way. The reason I do that is that I can line everything up as uniform as possible and keep it as a nice dice. The reason we're not just going to do a rough chop here is because we don't want pieces that are bigger than others. You don't want to bite into a piece of the pepper in the meat mixture versus not. And if you do have these smaller pieces, it distributes them through the meat more evenly, and you're not getting a big chunk of pepper in there. You're going to have plenty of pepper on the outside with the housing of the stuffing, and that way it's not going to be over exaggerated with the meat mixture as well. So I'm just going to keep on slicing these thin. Once I get them all sliced thin, we'll come back at them the opposite direction and get a nice fine dice on them. Now, I'm not worried about mixing the red and green here, because I'm going to mix it all together, and then equal parts, just to use it up, will go in the beef and the chicken. So it'll be nice and evenly distributed that way. Once I get these all sliced up and ready to rock and roll, I'll show you what the dice looks like, and then we will mix them into our meat mixtures. Alright, almost done with slicing it all up. I'm just going to show you the last little bit here. And then again, we'll come back at it on the opposite direction, get a nice fine dice. And once you're more comfortable with the knife as well, you can kind of adjust or contort your hands to suit what you're doing. Like sometimes you'll see me with my finger over the top. You really don't want to do that. You lose balance of the knife. You want to grip it right in the center of the blade there. But what we're going to do is we're just going to turn these around, try to line it up as good as possible, and then we're just going to come back at it on a fine dice. Once we get through all these peppers, we'll get it mixed into the meat mixture, and it should all be really good. Sometimes people add onion as well. I'm going to avoid any onion or garlic because the meat itself is seasoned pretty well, so we don't need all that extra flavor, even though it wouldn't hurt. But it's going to take a bit more time to cook, being that the onion chunks and stuff like that will be raw, and we don't want to do that as well. We just want it all to cook nice and evenly, so that's why I'm cutting these as small as I can. And as they're baking in the oven, it should be able to soften these up and cook them real nice. If you see any miscellaneous pieces that get a little stray or a little too big, just give them a little chop, you know, nothing too crazy. But you can see like how fine the dice of this is. It's going to be more on the fine side. And just go down the peppers like so, almost where we want them. Yeah, once you do get a little more comfortable with your blade, you can kind of, like I said, use it to your discretion. Just be careful. Again, you want to have most control over the blade as possible. That's also going to help you in the long run cut everything evenly. So I do see a couple stragglers that got a little big on me. I'm just going to go back at them the opposite way. We'll chop them up real quick. So that's the kind of dice we're looking for there. It's like a fine dice of the green and red, looking pretty good. And again, we're just going to mix this half and half into our meat mixtures. That's also going to be able to use up that. Did you see how much I had there? Look how much would have been wasted had I just thrown it away. We don't want to waste, we want to save. Alright, so now that we got that all done, I'm going to give my meat mixtures a good mix just to distribute those rest of the bell pepper evenly. Just want to get a good mix there, spread it out, fold it over if need be. And by this time as well, the meat's nice and cool. I want it cool, not cold, but I want it a little bit cool so that when I do add it to the peppers and we get to stuff in it, it's not going to take extremely long time to get hot in the center. And those peppers will cook down and soften, and that's the goal. You don't want them al dente or crunchy with a stuffed pepper. You kind of want a softer bite. So now that's all mixed through. So we're going to do this individually, one meat at a time. So I do have some Spanish rice here that I get from the store. It's an excellent choice. I think I've used it before in one of my videos when I was making I don't recall, fajitas or something like that. I'm also going to use a little more of the beef birria sauce, as well as a green enchilada sauce that I thinned out with a little bit of sour cream just to enhance the flavor there. But I'm going to get some gloves on, and that way I'm going to change out the glove on each mixture I do. So I'm going to start with the beef, and what we're going to do is we're going to add the beef, the rice, and a bunch of cheese to it. And then we're going to set it aside. The beef is again going in the red peppers, chicken in the green. And then we'll do the same thing basically with the chicken. So just based on how big my peppers are, kind of gauge how much you're going to need. I might not need all this meat, which will be great because I'll save it for another day, making something else. So that looks pretty good there. And we want to add about probably half a cup to a cup of rice here. Don't want to go crazy with it, but you're just trying to give it a little bit of a filler. And that rice is not cooked in the sense that I haven't heated it up again. It is cooked when you buy it at the store, but we want to just kind of mix it evenly throughout the meat here. Once we get it kind of evenly distributed through the meat, this will suck up some of the moisture as well. So that'll also help it not to be too runny or juicy. So I got a couple different kinds of cheese here. So we're going to do, this is a pepper jack cheese with cheddar. I'm also going to add some Monterey Jack. Make a nice gooey cheese. Like so. And then I also have a Mexican blend, which is a nice thick cut. So it's going to kind of distribute itself throughout that mixture a bit better as well. And we will put cheese on the top once we bake them off as well, but we don't want to do that until it's like probably about 90% of the way there, and then we'll add some cheese to the top and kind of brown that cheese on top of the stuffed pepper once it's almost ready. Alright, so there's our mixture. It's got cheese, it's got rice, it's got our beef with all that flavor and seasoning, and we're going to set it aside. And we're going to start with the chicken. I'm actually going to take this one and transfer the bowl and or use a different bowl. We'll just set this aside over by the beef. Here's our chicken. Again, same thing. You want to kind of judge how much you're going to need in those peppers according to with your rice and everything else. So we're going to add our rice here. Again, about the same amount. We want about a cup or so. Add our cheeses. Alright, Monterey Jack. Good there, and then our thick cut Mexican cheese. As a bit of a garnish, I'm going to do some cilantro on top. We can use some sour cream and avocado or guacamole as well, just as a garnish for it. But now that I got this all together, I'm going to mix it all through. And then I'm going to change my gloves so I get some nice fresh gloves on, because I'm going to need them on both hands at that point. And then we're going to pack these full. We're going to pour some sauce over the top. I am going to wrap it in foil initially to start baking. Once those peppers soften up a little bit, I'll take that foil off so some of that moisture gets cooked off as well. But there's our chicken mixture. Again, we're going to set it aside. And I'll be right back with you so we can start stuffing these peppers. Alright, ready to stuff the peppers. So what I'm going to do first on this is I'm going to put a little bit of sauce down in the pan itself. Not a ton, but a little bit, just to kind of protect it. I'm also going to spread it out a little bit, get it nice and even. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a bed of some of this rice as well. And we're going to just pour the rice in there as like a little bed. We don't want it too thick. We are going to cook this in our toaster oven though, so it's not going to burn on the bottom like it would in our main oven. But now that we got a nice even there, I may as well use up the rest, get it all out of there. So again, individually we're going to do our peppers. We're going to have to kind of stagger them like so. I'm going to show you real quick. Just because if we don't do that, then it won't have enough room in the pan. I tried a couple different pans that won't really work, so we're just going to do it this way. And I know it's a little high for the pan, but again, we're going to cover it in some foil. It's not going to be too saucy where it's going to spill out, so we should be all good there. But let's start with the chicken here. So we're going to take our pepper, Oh, lost one down here. You gotta give it a rinse. So we're gonna take our pepper and we're gonna hold it like a cup. And then we're gonna go ahead and start packing it with the goodies. So again, we're here with our chicken. And there's a reason why you don't want to split it down the side. Because you want to get these nice and full, but you don't want it breaking. You want to get all that stuff packed in there nice and even. Kind of push it down. And you do want it to kind of hang out a little bit, like so. That's a nice packed one there. And it looks like I did just about enough of the meat mixture, so it's not going to be in abundance. But again, we can kind of gauge as well how full they are, and if we need to, we can pack a little bit more on top. All right, chicken almost done there. You get this last one stuffed. And go ahead and use your fingers to make sure that you're getting it all the way deep in there into the sides of the walls. And just based on what I'm looking at here, we do have a little bit of excess. So I'm going to put it right on top of these. Like so. It's very, very little, so it's not going to make a huge difference. But we don't want to waste. We want to use all that meat, especially as much as meat is these days. So we're going to get the rest of that little bit on there. Perfect. Now we will start with our beef mixture. And again, we're going to set aside the remainder of meats that we have, and we'll use those in a later date. So same thing here. I do have a bit more beef, it looks like, than I did the chicken. But then again, these red peppers are a little wider as well. So we're just going to make sure we get them good and stuffed in there. And if I do have a bit of excess remaining, I can always freeze it and use it at a later date for the same recipe. Or if I'm making some kind of enchilada or stuffed poblano pepper or something like that as well. And get it all in there, pack it in nice and tight, like so. Last one, yeah, we're definitely going to have some extra, but no big deal. We'll just put it in a Ziploc bag, throw it in our freezer for a later date. We got it ready to go. See, now I did press it and it just split that pepper a little bit. So what I'm going to do, because that happened, so I don't have it all spilling out the side of it, so I'm going to point it towards the center of the pan. That way anything that does leak out will leak out into the pan itself and not to the side. That way it's all kind of good and wholesome there. All right. Peppers are ready to go. So I'm going to add a little bit of sauce. I'm going to start with the green sauce. That's going to go over the chicken. We just want to add a nice ladle full on each one. Like so. I'm going to add a little bit to the rice underneath it, just to give it the moisture it needs. Kind of in between the crevices there. And whatever I do have left of this sauce, kind of the same thing. We'll save it for a later date. Use it in something else. And again, we're just using the birria sauce on the beef. So pour a little of that over the top of each one. Be careful not to let it spill off the side of the pan. And same thing, we want to get a little bit of that in the rice on the bottom. That pretty much used up the beef birria sauce, which is all good. All right, looking good so far. We're going to get these guys wrapped in foil, and then we'll start them in our toaster oven. They probably take about an hour, hour and a half. But we don't want to overcook them either. We don't want them to be just mush. So pay attention to the cook time on them. I'm going to go at about 350 in a toaster oven, which isn't nearly as hot as 350 in an oven. And then we're going to just cook those for about an hour, see where we're at. When you're putting the foil on here, you want to be cautious not to lay it right on top of the peppers and the sauce. So I kind of tent it. Make like a tent out of it, like so. And again, some of it will touch, but not a big deal. We're just trying to seal in those that water vapor. That's going to help it cook a bit further. And again, we will take this off at a certain point as well. So that's all ready to rock and roll. We're going to get it in our toaster oven. Once it comes out, we will show a bit of a plating short. But a real easy meal, getting everything together, using some leftovers from yesterday. A nice cheesy dish for the family.